Hi class! Welcome to another exciting episode of a meaningful learning in zoology. For today's video, I have here with me my co-PSD, Ma'am Jit Lauron and Ma'am Judy Ann Romagera. Now, before we proceed to our proper discussion, I have here a short audio-visual presentation showing a glimpse of the reproductive processes. So please, take a look at this. At this point of time, let us start our discussion with an activity. So what I have here are the pictures of an animals, and I want you to identify whether of these animals reproduce sexually or asexually. Are you ready? Okay, let's start with the first picture. Yes, Miss Ibanez? Correct. How about the second picture? Yes, Miss Mariaca? Yes, thank you. You're correct. How about the third picture? Yes, correct. So for my follow-up questions, I want Mr. Sinangote to answer it. Yes, Mr. Sinangote. My question would be, between sexually and asexually reproducing organisms, which do you think are difficult to enumerate and why? Yes, thank you for your brilliant idea. Next, what does asexual reproduction allow animals to do? What do you think? Yes, thank you for your idea. And lastly, why do most animals not reproduce asexually? What do you think is the reason? So, later, together, let's all find out if all of your answers are correct. Because for now, we are finally moving on to our fourth lesson in this module, which is all about the reproductive processes. We all know that living things will eventually die. Do you agree? If that's the case, then why do we still exist? Why there are still animals? Why there are a lot of plants in our environments? Can somebody tell me why? Yes, that is because organisms are capable of reproducing. Organisms are capable of creating new organisms. And this process is what we call the reproduction. So actually, there are two recognized modes of reproduction. These are the asexual reproduction and the sexual reproduction. But first, let's go deeper on what is asexual reproduction. So asexual reproduction is a production of an individuals without gametes. So what do you mean by gametes? So gametes refers to the sperm and the egg cell of an organism. So asexual reproduction, it includes a number of distinct processes, and all of those processes are without involving sex or a second parent. And asexual reproduction appears in bacteria and unicellular eukaryotes, and in many invertebrate phyla such as cnidarians, the bryozoans, the annelids, the echinoderms, and the hemichordates. Now, let us talk about the basic forms of asexual reproduction, which includes the fission, the budding, the gemellation, and the fragmentation. But first, let us talk about what is binary fission. Binary fission is common among bacteria and protozoa. In binary fission, the body of the unicellular parent divides by mitosis into two approximately equal parts, and each of which grows into an individual similar to the parent. So, binary fission may be lengthwise, as in flagellate protozoa, or transverse, as in ciliate protozoa. So that is binary fission. And now let's proceed on what is budding. So budding is an unequal division of an organism. So a new individual arises as an outgrowth from its parent, and it develops organs like those of the parent and then detaches itself. Budding occurs in several animal phyla and is especially prominent in cnidarians. Then, let's proceed on what is gemellation. So, gemellation is the formation of a new individual from an aggregation of cells surrounded by a resistant capsule called the gemule. So, in many freshwater sponges, gemmules develop in the fall and survive the winter in the dried or frozen body of the parent. So, in spring, the enclosed cells become active, emerge from the capsule, and grow into a new sponge. So that is gemellation. Now let's proceed on what is fragmentation. So in fragmentation, a multicellular animal breaks into two or more parts, with each fragment capable of becoming a complete individual. Many invertebrates can reproduce asexually by simply breaking into two parts and then regenerating the missing parts of the fragments. So for example, most of the anemones and many hydroids. Many echinoderms can regenerate lost parts, but this is not the same as reproduction by fragmentation. So that is what we call the fragmentation. Now let's move on what is sexual reproduction. So sexual reproduction is the production of individuals from gametes. So meaning sexual reproduction is in contrast on what is asexual, because asexual reproduction does not require gametes, while sexual reproduction requires gametes from both parents. So sexual reproduction includes bisexual reproduction as the most common form, involving two separate individuals, hermaphroditism, and parthenogenesis, which are the less common forms of sexual reproduction. Now let's talk about what is bisexual reproduction. So bisexual reproduction is the production of offspring formed by the union of gametes from two genetically different parents. So from the name itself, bisexual, so the bi there means two. So probably there would be two parents or individuals involved in this reproduction. So I think the most concrete example for this is that we humans. Remember, we humans, in order for us to create an organism or create our offspring, there must be an egg cell from the female and a sperm cell from the male. So, for animals, we can say the dogs, the cats, the animals, the carabaos, and many more. So that is bisexual reproduction. Now let's talk about the second form of sexual reproduction. So, hermaphrodite is the term used to describe an individual, an organism, or an animal that has both male and female reproductive organ. So they are called hermaphrodites. And the condition is called hermaphroditism. So I think one of the best example for that in plants is the gomamela. So the gomamela flower, which we all know the reproductive part or reproductive organ of the plant, contains both male and female reproductive organ. So we can say that gomamela is a hermaphrodite and the condition is called hermaphroditism. And many burrowing or endoparasitic invertebrate animals are hermaphroditic. So for example, most flatworms, some hydroids and annelids, and all barnacles and pulmonate snails, as well as few vertebrates such as some fishes. So some fishes are sequential hermaphrodites. So what is sequential hermaphrodites? So sequential hermaphrodites is when a genetically programmed sex change occurs within an individual organism. So in many species of reef fishes, for example, wrasses, an animal begins life as either female or male, so depending on the species, but later becomes the opposite sex. So that is sequential hermaphrodites. Finally, we are on the third form of sexual reproduction, which is the parthenogenesis. So what is parthenogenesis? Parthenogenesis is also known as the virgin origin, and it is the development of an embryo from an unfertilized egg or one in which the male and female nuclei fail to unite following the fertilization. So there are many patterns of parthenogenesis. So in one type called amniotic parthenogenesis. So what is that? There is no meiosis occurs and the egg is formed by mitotic cell division. So this asexual form of parthenogenesis occurs in some species of flatworms, rotifers, crustaceans, insects, and probably others. So in these cases, the offspring are clones of the parent because without meiosis, the parent's chromosomal complement is passed intact to its offspring. So that is why the offspring are considered as the clones of the parents. So that is parthenogenesis.
The origin and maturation of germ cells. Most cells in our body are somatic cells, meaning a body cells that are not involved in reproduction. Example, blood cells, bone cells, and skin cells. Somatic cells are diploid, meaning they contain two sets of chromosomes, a pair of chromosomes, 23 chromosomes from a father and 23 chromosomes from a mother. Somatic cells cannot form egg and sperm, but they are necessary for support and protection and nourishment in germ cell during their development or gametogenesis. Though germ cells are diploid, but it can only be found in gonads. So what is gonads? Gonads are the ovaries for female and testes for male. In gonads, female generates a gamete called eggs, and the males called sperm. That gametes are haploid cells, meaning they only have one set of chromosomes. Thus, for instance, in human, gametes have 23 chromosomes. To make haploid gametes, diploid germ cells must go through several rounds of cell division and form numerous new cells. A germ line or a germ cell line is the entire cell sequence from the germ cell to the gamete. Germ cell plays a big role in passing the genes from generation to generation. Now, let's talk about the migration of germ cell. All sexually producing organisms came from the fusion of gametes, and all gametes are coming from the primordial germ cell. Primordial germ cell is the precursor of gametes, meaning before the gametes is created, it will undergo first the process where primordial germ cells are formed. During fertilization, if you remember in your past learning, the genetic factor XY and XX chromosomes is very essential for the identification of the sex of an organism. If the offspring will give or inherit the Y chromosomes, it will be going to produce male organisms, provided with the X and Y factor that express properly. If the offspring inherited XX chromosomes, then it will be female organisms. It happens when, after fertilization, the embryo, cleavage, and as well as the epiblast, which also called bilaminar test, are formed. From that epiblast test, some of the cell will detach and it forms primordial germ cell. After the primordial germ cell is formed, it will migrate from the three-germ layer, the base of the yolk sac, endoderm. The three-germ layer, namely ectoderm, mesoderm, and endoderm, are going to form a whole fetus. Thus, the primordial germ cell will still remain in the base of the yolk sac, and it is not part of the embryogenesis. After that, the primordial germ cell will migrate to the gonadal ridge, and this gonadal ridge will become a testis or ovary depending on XX or XY factor expressions are finally formed gonad. Question: if the primordial germ cell failed to migrate at gonadal ridge, does the organ, testis and ovary will still form? According to the study, for some reason, if the primordial germ failed to migrate in gonadal ridge, the organ will still form a gonad, but without a primordial germ cell or without the sperm or egg. And another study says that if there's a chemical or physical factor affects the migration of primordial germ cell, will cause genital risk. Let's discuss the gametogenesis. Gametogenesis is the process in which the formation of gametes takes place. For male, the process is called spermatogenesis, the production of spermatozoa or sperm, while in female, the process is called oogenesis, the production of ovum or egg. Let's talk first the spermatogenesis. Spermatogenesis occurs in the testes, particularly in the seminiferous tubules. Produces germ cell gametes, the sperm. A while ago, I've mentioned the primordial germ cell that migrates into gonadal ridge that become a testis and ovary. The primordial germ cell becomes a mature germ cells called sperm mother cells or spermatogonia. It happens in the surface of seminiferous tubules. The spermatogonia is the first round of diploid that divided into two identical cells by mitosis. The spermatogonia will migrate towards in a central lumen of seminiferous tubule and become modified and enlarged to form a primary spermatocytes. Accordingly, some of primary spermatocytes undergo first meiotic division to form secondary spermatocytes, which are haploid with 23 chromosomes. Each of that spermatocytes consists of 23 chromosomes. And secondary spermatocytes will undergo second meiotic division to generate 4 haploid spermatids. The spermatids will become into a mature spermatozoa or sperm. Now let's talk oogenesis. Oogenesis is the process of development of the female gametes or ovum or an egg in the ovary. Oogenesis begins during fetal development when a primordial germ cells are transformed first to oogonia by mitosis and produce millions of egg mother cells. Oogonia cells starts to divide and enter into prophase 1 of meiotic cells division to form primary oocytes, which is temporarily arrested at the stage or stop. It is because the primary oocytes will get surrounded by a single layer of granulosa to form primary follicles. Along the process, the oocytes will undergo up until tertiary follicle. At that time, the primary oocyte within the tertiary follicle grows in size and completed the first meiotic division and form a secondary oocytes. So what happened? Why secondary oocyte become big? It is because there's an equal division that results to the production of a large haploid secondary oocytes and the first polar body. The first polar body will now break or separate to the area. Thus, during fertilization, the secondary oocyte undergo meiotic cell division and produce a large cell called ovum and secondary polar body, which is also degenerates afterwards. At the end of oogenesis, each primary oocyte gives only one haploid of ovum.
Let us now discuss the reproductive patterns. Some animals reproduce in many ways, unlike humans. There are some animals who reproduce by laying their eggs, and some animals who reproduce like how the human bear their offspring. In this topic, we will discuss the reproductive patterns, which are the oviparous, ovoviviparous, and viviparous. Let's talk first about the oviparous. The great majority of invertebrates as well as many vertebrates lay their eggs outside the body for development. These animals are what we call the oviparous or the egg birth. In oviparous, fertilization may be either internal, where the eggs are fertilized inside the body of a female before they lay eggs, or external eggs that are fertilized by a male after a female lays them. While many oviparous animals simply abandon their eggs rather indiscriminately, others display extreme care in finding places that will provide immediate and suitable sources of food for the young when they hatch. For example, are the frogs and chicken. The second pattern is the ovoviviparous. Some animals retain eggs in their body while they develop with embryos deriving all their nourishment from yolks stored within the egg. These animals are what we call ovoviviparous or egg live birth. Ovoviviparity occurs in several invertebrate groups and is common among certain fishes and reptiles. Next, we have the third pattern, which is the viviparous. In the third pattern, viviparous or live bird eggs develop in the oviduct or uterus with embryos deriving their nourishment directly from the mother. Viviparity is confined mostly to lizards, snakes, mammals, and elasmobranch fishes, although viviparous invertebrates like the scorpions, for example, and amphibians are known. Development of embryos within a mother's body, whether oviviparous or viviparous, obviously affords more protection to the offspring than laying the egg. So since you already know the reproductive pattern, can you identify what are those? Yes, you are correct. We have the oviparous, ovoviviparous, and viviparous. Next, let's proceed to the structure of the reproductive system. The basic components of reproductive systems are similar in sexual animals, although differences in reproductive habits and methods of fertilization have produced many variations. Sexual systems consist of two components. We have the primary organs, which are the gonads that reproduce sperm and eggs and sex hormones. And the second is the accessory organs, which assist the gonads in formation and delivery of gametes and may also serve to support the embryo. Next, we have the invertebrate reproductive system. In invertebrates, it transforms sperm from male to female for internal fertilization that require organs and plumbing to facilitate these functions that may be as complex as those of any vertebrates. In contrast, reproductive system of invertebrates that simply release their gametes into their water for external fertilization may be little more than centers of gametogenesis. We have the male reproductive system, in which the male reproductive system of vertebrates such as that of human males includes the testes, vasa efferentia, vas deferens, accessory glands, and in some birds and reptiles and all mammals are the penis. Paired testes are the sites of sperm production. Each testis is composed of numerous seminiferous tubules in which the sperm develop. The sperm are surrounded by Sertoli cells or the sustentacular cells, which nourish the developing sperm. Between the tubules and interstitial cells or Leydig cells, which produce the male sex hormones, which is the testosterone. The sperm travel from the seminiferous tubules to the vasa efferentia, small tubes passing to a coiled epididymis, where final sperm maturation occurs, and then to a vas deferens, which is the ejaculatory duct. In mammals, the vas deferens joins the urethra, a duct that carries both sperm and urinary products through the penis or external estreminate organ. Next, we have the vertebrate reproductive systems. In vertebrate reproductive systems, the reproductive and excretory system are together called the urogenital system because of their close anatomical connection, especially in males. This association is very striking during embryonic development. In male fishes and amphibians, The duct that drains the kidney, or the opistronephric duct or Wolffian duct, also serves as a sperm duct. In male reptiles, birds, and mammals, in which the kidney develops its own independent duct or the ureter to carry away waste, the old mesenophric duct becomes exclusively a sperm duct or vas deferens. In the female reproductive system, mature ova from each ovary enter the funnel-like opening of a uterine tube or oviduct, which typically has a fringed margin or fimbriae that envelops the ovary at the time of ovulation. The terminal end of the uterine tube is unspecialized in most fishes and amphibians, but in cartilaginous fishes, reptiles, and birds that produce a large shelled egg, special regions have developed for production of albumin and shell. In amniotes, reptiles, birds, and mammals, the terminal portion of the uterine tube is expanded into a muscular uterus in which shelled eggs are held before laying or in which embryos complete their development. In placental mammals, the walls of the uterus establish a close vascular association with embryonic membranes through a placenta. So that concludes our discussion for today. For your activity, we have the application and evaluation. In application, we have two parts, which is the identification and the Venn diagram. So you just have to take a screenshot and submit it to our Google Classroom. For the evaluation, we will divide you into 10 groups and you will provide a poster of the male and female reproductive system. You will also submit it to our Google Classroom. For your assignment, you have to answer directly and concisely the question, which is, you have to discuss and explain comprehensively the importance of cellular phenomena that occurs during meiosis.
We hope that you learned something from this discussion, and thank you for listening.